Formula Junior cars are fast. You can be even faster. Become a subscriber right now. Click that button, click the bell icon to be notified when we post great new content, and boom, you're here. Welcome to the Audrain Automobile Museum and our exhibition, The Magic of Monaco. Today, my friend Nick Waller and I are going to talk about another set of open-wheeled race cars, and one which continues that idea of national rivalry, the great Formula Juniors.
Yes.
And we have three spectacular examples that really tell the story of the Formula Junior.
You do. The Formula Junior really was the kind of introductory series that brought aspiring drivers to the forefront, made them competitive. They could cut their teeth in motor racing around Europe. And these three examples really sum up what it was all about. And it's a series that still very much exists today and is hotly contested in historic racing.
Well, one of the things that's so interesting about Formula Junior is the fact that, as is so often the case, it was started as a way for people to get inexpensively into racing. It gradually, over its life, became more expensive as more manufacturers became involved and the competition became a little bit fiercer. But it was also, of course, the opportunity for young drivers to showcase themselves in front of the Formula One teams.
Yes.
So that they could see, wow, you know, that Nick Waller can really handle that Formula Junior car very well in the rain. He might be a great second reserve driver if we need one on a Thursday.
I can hear those words. And I can hear those words being spoken by the great Colin Chapman, who started Lotus, and the car that I'm standing in front of, the Lotus 18, is really, he built cars for every series of racing. Sports cars, small Formula Juniors, and of course Formula One. And of course Indianapolis, he raced at Indianapolis.
And rally cars.
And rally cars, of course, absolutely. He covered all the bases. But the interesting thing about this car particularly is it shows its transition from the front-engined Stangolini and the Oscar to the rear-engined Lotus that brought Lotus again so many victories.
Well, let's talk about that, because again, the whole idea of national identities and attitudes are represented as well with these three cars. Formula Junior was created by Count Laurani, who thought he was tired of seeing British manufacturers and British drivers dominating the feeder series. You think about the race that Stirling Moss and all the greats had in the 500cc cars. Absolutely amazing cars to look at. Incredible power to weight ratio, and it's all about car control.
Yeah, crazy.
Akin to an American sprint car on a dirt track. And so he said, let's do something around the incredibly available, very affordable, and extremely tunable Fiat 1100 engine. And so the Formula Junior was born, and with it, a plethora of manufacturers, which are now referred to as Ecceterini, were born and developed. Stangolini, Bandini, all those things. Oscar, of course, is the Maserati brothers.
Absolutely. The Maserati brothers, who sold their own company to the Orsi family and set up Oscar. What a wonderful car.
It's also so interesting. We talked earlier about Enzo Ferrari and his arrangement with Alfa Romeo and the non-compete period. And the Maserati brothers also had a similar situation where they could not build cars between 1937, when they sold the company, for 10 years. Well, guess what? 10 years later, they were able to establish themselves back in Bologna with Oscar. And also looking at this car, we'll start with the Oscar, because first and foremost, it comes from a wonderful collection, the Oriana collection, one of the leading collection of Italian cars in the world, with a real emphasis on sports racing cars. And what's wonderful about Larry Oriana is that he loves to take his cars out and use them. His collection manager, Joe Colasacco, is a brilliant driver who wins races at Goodwood and Monaco Historics and Le Mans. And I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. So you see these cars like this Oscar, which is so incredibly beautiful, but it also runs incredibly well.
Yes.
And it's just, you look at it, it's just the perfect form. You know, you want to drive the car and you also want to hang it on the wall.
Yeah, well, they are beautiful driving cars. The engineering is fabulous. The engines are wonderful. They very often, when in the sports cars, they had beautiful coachwork from Zagato, among others. Lightweight. The power to weight ratio, obviously very, very important. But this example is one of the most famous and one of the most successful of the Formula Junior era, the peak of the Formula Junior era.
Absolutely. It didn't last that long. And again, we'll get to your friends at Lotus. And this car that I'm standing next to, the Stanguolini, which comes from the great collection of Bill Gellis, is a 1962 model, which is basically the end of the Formula Junior era. 1963 onward, they went to a different formula. But it also is that last gasp of the front-engined car, which the Italian manufacturers stuck to, including Ferrari, for slightly longer than they needed to.
They did, because the rear-engined layout had proved itself, and it had proved itself phenomenally well. Every Grand Prix was being won by rear-engine Coopers, of which we'll talk more about in another video. And to hold on to the front engine, you can understand, but they were still very competitive, and it was all about taking part. It was all about the learning curve. And you can really equate these cars to university. And you hadn't quite graduated yet, but you were probably in your final year.
Exactly. And so let's talk about this Lotus a bit, this Lotus 18, because I know that when I go to Goodwood and watch the historic racing, you always see tons of these cars, and they're so incredibly great to watch.
Yeah.
But you know, again, the idea of the rear-engine cars, and of course, rear-engine cars not being new, since Auto Union pioneered that in the 1930s. But I think that a lot of what the Auto Union's problems with weight and tire use and all that sort of made people like the Italian manufacturers think, I don't want to go down that route. It's complex. Let's just stick what we know, design a really great chassis around a really dependable, known engine, and not have to worry about packaging and all these things. And of course, when you get to the brilliance of Colin Chapman, which is, it's an apocryphal tale. I mean, he would add lightness. How can you add lightness?
Colin Chapman was famous for building cars that lasted one race. If you managed to cross the finish line, the car was whisked back to the factory and basically everything was mended. They were designed with tolerances just for those few laps. But every great driver cut their teeth on a Lotus. Derek Bell, the wonderful Derek Bell, drove his first race ever at Goodwood in a Lotus 7. They all have an affinity with Lotus. And Colin Chapman was an amazing guy. And he went all the way through from the late 40s all the way through to the 80s and 90s, was still winning races. And of course, this wonderful example of the Lotus 18 is owned and generously lent to us by the great Harren de Silva. And we're eternally grateful to all of our lenders, but particularly for this car, because it's a great car and it has really warmed my heart to see it.
The other thing is that, you know, many people just assume that I'm only an Italian car guy, when of course that could not be further from the truth. I love Italian cars, but I love all cars. Yeah. And one of my favorite memories of my childhood is a photograph taken of me at 8 years old, building a model of a Lotus 29 with my brother, my oldest brother. And because I was just totally taken by this strange little English car that comes in the Indianapolis 500, and the car looked 1/3 the size of all the rest of the cars on the field, and it just went like a rocket. I thought, wow, this is amazing. You know, watching my hour-and-a-half highlight of the race on the wide world of sports, and I was just captivated by it. And you know, still today, I love Lotus cars, and it's one of those great things when you look at cars like these, you can see the infinite variety and the incredible charm of everyone.
Yes, everyone has a personality. Every car should have a personality. I have a similar story of racing a Lotus 16, I think it was, the last of the front engine Lotus, but scale extric. was my favorite ever car, and it came as a pair with the shark-nosed Ferrari, and my sister and I used to race these. Just fabulous memories. And
Does she win more often than you?
I'm not going to say.
Okay. The other thing is, looking at these cars in the context of Monaco, you know, there's always a discussion in every age of Formula One about Formula One cars being unsuited to Monaco because of their tightness. You look at these cars and then compare them to the cars of the 1920s and 30s. This is the scale for Monaco.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think it would be a spectacular thing to see modern Formula cars built to a size like this with our current safety regulations and provisions. It would be brilliant.
It would be fascinating. Well, there's a series that we can work on.
Let's start it.
Let's do it.
Watch this channel. You never know. Well, thanks a lot, Nick, and thank you for joining us to get this little glimpse into the wonderful history of Formula Junior, another great part of the magic of Monaco. Thanks for watching. Look out for our next video.